Welcome everyone. I'm glad you could make it to the Carpinteria Art Center today. My name is Gib Johnson and I'm one of the many volunteers at the Art Center. I would like to welcome you to our first show of 2015, Illuminations, which will be open for the next 5.5 weeks. I've just taken a look at it. It's really beautiful. If you haven't seen it, I think you'll be very impressed. If you're interested in the 2015 shows, copies of the exhibition schedule are available inside. That's what they look like. If you love art, come and see our shows. If you're an artist, please enter our shows. We'd love to have you. I'd like to thank a few people. First of all, I'd like to thank the many volunteers, many of whom are sitting in front of me today, who made the Illumination show happen, made the in-gathering happen, and made yesterday's opening happen. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I know the whole Art Center appreciates it too. Thank you also for the many gallery hosts who work throughout the year as volunteers to staff the gallery and keep the gallery open. We do appreciate you. I also want to thank our videographer Larry Nimmer. Thank you, Larry, very much for being our videographer whenever an artist speaks. And as many of you know, the filming is then put on the website a few days later, and you can see John Iwerks' discussion of the work he chose here today. So that's available. Thank you, Larry. I'd also like to thank Ted Pilcher for getting this all together, and also for Sherry Fraser, who works throughout the year to make this a terrific art center. Thank you. I'd like to introduce John Iwerks now. We're very happy to have him here. It was a very large in-gathering. There were 80 artists bringing in 150 pieces of art, and of those 150 pieces, 73 were chosen by John, and he tells me it was a very difficult decision based on the size of the show. So I know he'd like to have had even more artists represented. John was born in 1955 in Burbank, and he was interested in art from the very beginning, primarily cartooning and illustration. After high school, he moved to Santa Barbara. He and his wife, Chris Chapman, worked for 4 years as preserve managers at the Arroyo Hondo Preserve, and lived for 8 years at the Rancho Dos Pueblos. For the last 1.5 years, he's lived in Santa Ynez and is spending much of his time there. John studied art at the Santa Barbara Art Institute, Santa Barbara City College, and the Mendocino Art Center. He was one of the founding members of the Oak Group in 1986 and continues to be a member along with his wife, the artist Chris Chapman, and his brother Larry Iwerks. Besides his paintings, he's best known for his animated flip books, one called See You Later Alligator, 1978, and I understand that if you have a copy, it's valuable, so hang on to it. He's also known very much so for his murals and graphics, which are displayed at colleges, universities, museums, and community centers around Southern California. There's a cat at my foot. John is particularly interested in the natural world. Among his proudest accomplishments are the geologic cross-section of murals of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara Channel, which are at the Santa Barbara City College Geology and Department and the UCSB Geology Department. In fact, John has been designated a fellow at the UCSB Geology Department, which is pretty cool. He says he is most notably influenced by the painter Ray Strong and UCSB Professor Emeritus Tanya Atwater. He's currently working on a private commission, which is a painting of an underwater kelp bed, and he's also finishing illustrations for a new children's book. John is, if you're interested in John's teaching, which I know many of you are, he's doing workshops and demonstrations for the Wilding Museum in Solvang. Finally, John is represented by the Easton Gallery in Montecito, where he has a show coming up in February. He's represented also at the Larry Iwerks Weldon Art Ranch on the Santa Barbara Mesa, and occasionally at Gallery 113. And I think he will tell you about the next Oak Group show at the Faulkner Gallery. We're very glad to have John Iwerks here today and to hear him speak about his choices in today's show. So please welcome John Iwerks.
Thank you. I've got a little voice box, so you can hear me in the back, because oftentimes I don't project all that well. Can you hear that? Well, foremost, I really appreciate being asked to jury this show. It was really excellent work, and there was so much of it that was like Gibb said, it was rather hard to narrow it down to enough pieces that would fit in the walls. And so I suggested that they should expand the walls, and, which hopefully is possible, except for these beautiful trees. You'd have to do a second floor or something. But it was very nice work. I liked the thought of illumination that so many people chose to paint towards that theme. And there were a lot of abstract pieces, and it was interesting to see. And but some beautiful photography and just wonderful array of diverse pieces. I haven't spoken for a long time, so I hope I'm doing okay here. But I haven't taught for about 1.5 years now. I taught for about 23 years at adult education, and then abruptly we had to move to Santa Ynez, and the physical barrier of the Santa Ynez Mountains somehow keeps me from going back to adult ed. How's that? Okay. But I have been teaching a couple of classes through the Wildling Museum in Solvang, and leading a tour in April, if anybody's interested, to the Carrizo Plain. It's a one-day trip. April 18th, I believe it is, and many years ago I did a project for the Nature Conservancy on the Carrizo Plain, and they have a visitor center out there. Carrizo Plain is in San Luis Obispo County in the southeastern corner, kind of on your way to Bakersfield. And it's a beautiful open grassland, and I was fortunate to be asked to paint a mural and then work on the exhibit designs for the geology and the ecology and botany, a variety of displays in there. And so the Wildling Museum asked if I would lead a tour to talk about that mural. And but it was a very nice place to be artist in residence for about 3 or 4 years. And I lived out there for 2 weeks, would come home to check the mail, and then go out for another couple of weeks. And so it was a really wonderful time in my life to be able to interpret nature on the spot. And when I wasn't working on that, I could just go outside and paint the landscape, because it was right in the middle of this beautiful grassland. At the same time, I was approached by the National Park Service to do a three-dimensional model of Santa Barbara Island out of bronze. And so it involved topographic maps and building layer by layer this little model. And then they said, well, could you perhaps paint a mural too? And we want an underwater kelp forest mural. And at the time, I was sort of going between Carrizo Plain and Santa Barbara Island, so it was quite a juggling act. But I asked my friend Glenna Hartman, if you remember Glenna. She was so good at painting sea mammals, and I had a couple of sea lions and a gray whale and some dolphins in there, and I said, well, would you like to paint on this? And she said, sure. So I kind of brought her into the fold. I could pay her to paint the sea mammals. But when I had to go to Santa Barbara Island, they said, well, could you also do a diorama? We have a little closet space here. And that was a whole other project, because you have to build the three-dimensional pieces. So I built a full-scale mock-up at home in Santa Barbara and built the whole thing out of all these pieces, and then disassemble it and take it all out there and put it back together again, and then paint the background. So during that time, Glenna kept working on this mural of the kelp forest. And when I came back after a couple of weeks on Santa Barbara Island, I said, this is not my mural anymore. She brought in researchers and divers and everybody for critique. And they said, well, the Garibaldi should be down here, this purple urchin should be over there. And she did all this beautiful detail. And so but she says, no, you've painted everything else. And so I'm just happy to be able to do this. And that's what I'm doing right now. Is I have a picture of that on my website, and somebody saw that and says, I live right on the coast, and I look down on the kelp beds, and I'd like a kelp forest mural too. And so now I'm kind of channeling Glenna, saying, can you paint my sea lions? And she says, you can do it, you can do it. And, But it was fun in collaboration with Glenna. I worked on another piece for Cal State Northridge Geology Department. They had the big Northridge earthquake, and that sort of leveled their department. And after 4 years, they had rebuilt it, and they wanted to celebrate with a mural of what the San Fernando Valley looked like 17 million years ago. And so that was one of these things where a lot of research goes into it. It's a cross-section showing the birth of the Santa Monica Mountains, a big volcano, and sort of a coastal waterway. Hello. And but again, I asked Glenna. I said, well, I've got some sea mammals in here. And so she graciously came over to where I was painting this in a carport. And she always brought all the research, all the detailed things of prehistoric sea life. And she painted all the sharks and the sea lions and everything that was there. And but the last time I had a commission to do from that project, I had a project to do prehistoric murals for the city of Laguna Hills for their community center, because everywhere that they come up with a new housing project, they're pulling out all kinds of fossils. It's very fossil rich there, and so they wanted 3 murals. One of I think it was about 17 million years ago, and it was an underwater deep ocean with a lot of pecten shells, like clam shells and things that had been piled up in a torrential storm. It wasn't a natural reef. It was just sort of a bunch of shells, and then another one of about 6 million years ago of a shark about to attack a big colony of tuna. There may be a couple hundred tuna in there, and so it's underwater looking up. And then the last one was the Pleistocene of what it looks sort of like today, but it's filled with mammoths and mastodons and saber-toothed cats and things. And one of the best lessons I got was my father came over to bring a painter from the Disney studio, Peter Ellenshaw, to where I was working on these murals. And he said, at the time I was painting like the tusks on these mammoths that are supposed to be 4 or 5 miles away, and I'm painting their toes and a tiny little brush, and this is a big painting. And Peter Ellenshaw says, well, mind if I work on this? And I said, oh, he's a background painter of all the Mary Poppins and all these beautiful Disney films. And so I hand him my palette, and he says, bring me a big brush. So I give him my biggest brush was probably 1 inch. He says, no, a bigger brush. And so I go and get my house painting brushes. And finally, he chooses a 3 or 4 inch house painting brush and dips it into the turpentine and slurries it around, and then starts painting over the whole thing and just wipes it all out. And, there goes my mammoth. There goes my mountains. And I'm just going, well, I guess is that better? Yeah. I'm kind of in shock, but I wasn't quite sure what to say or do. I figured, well, he's the boss, he's the master. And finally, he hands me my palette back and says, well, you're just going to have to fight the fight. It's up to you. See, it's between you and the painting. One of you's got to win, and it should be you. And I'm going, okay. And we were living at a Royal Hondo at the time, so my studio was the barn, and all these big murals are just hanging on the wall of the barn. And so I said, well, let's go up the canyon. We'll drive you up, and you can see the meadow and such. And so we went up there, and then we said goodbye. And then my wife Chris comes out after they're gone, and she looks at the mural and says, what did he do? You know, it's like, you let him do that? And because the whole thing's all wiped out. And I said, well, there's got to be some reason for it. And it turned out to be one of the best lessons I ever had, because I was painting these tiny little tusks on these mammoths, and he says, atmosphere, you need air. You need to get the atmosphere in this first before you start painting toenails. And so that freed me up. All of a sudden, I felt like I had gotten too tight, and I couldn't change anything because I was too locked into it. And all of a sudden, I could just reinvent the whole thing and change the background, get the atmosphere, the fall color. It was a sunrise. And Peter Ellenshaw was very much into looking into the light. He wanted to see the shadows coming towards you. And so that was the second time I'd gone to him with a mural, and he said the same thing both times. It's like your light direction is completely backwards, because I had the light coming from behind me. And he says you should have the light coming towards you. And so that was kind of hard to swallow. After I almost finished a mural with the light coming from behind me, I had to just change all the shadows and all the light. But I figured that's the kind of discipline that artists at Disney have to do. They say, well, you have to get it right, and so that was a good kick that he gave me. That I realized that get your air first and your detail afterwards. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Can you explain a little more what you mean by painting with light coming towards you? That's so.
It's like right now the direction of the sun there, that everything that you're looking at has a shadow. You're looking at the shadow side, and the light's on the back side, so it's backlit. And you get more contrast that way. You get some stronger colors. You have a dynamic of the cast shadows because of the radiance of the light source. That off to your left, the shadows are going to the left, and off to your right, the shadows are going to the right. And in the middle, they're coming right at you. So you get a kind of a perspective quality that you can play with your shadows. A lot of times the highlight on an object, since it's pretty much you're seeing the shadow, you can see highlights of the trees, highlights of an animal's head or something, and that's a real nice bright tone. So you can kind of play with a lot of that. The kelp forest I'm doing now is that way. You're down at the seafloor looking up, and you're looking at the light, so everything is kind of backlit, and so you kind of play with the shadows and light on that. And if you look at if you have a chance to see Mary Poppins, all the streets of London are all painted by Peter Ellenshaw, and a lot of those are backlit, and you can see a lot of that quality that he's famous for. And he said that he became friends with Walt Disney, and Disney had a house in Palm Springs. He says, "Why don't you come down to the desert and paint the desert?" And he goes, "Oh, there's nothing there. What's to paint in the desert?" And but he went down and he painted backlit Palm Springs. He looks right at the sunrise, and he says Walt just fell in love with his paintings and started collecting them all. Come to his house and says, "Which ones? What can I buy?" So they had a great relationship. Yes.
Would you like to explain your relationship with Disney? Wasn't your dad Iwerks?
My grandfather.
Or your grandfather?
Iwerks, yes.
Okay, and then didn't he work along with Campbell Grant at Disney?
I'm not sure if they worked together or not. My grandfather he and Walt met when they were teenagers in Kansas City and started, they were both working at a slide company making little ads and things, and they said, well, let's go start our own company. So they tried that, and it worked for a couple months, and then it didn't. They couldn't make enough at it, and so my grandfather went back to the spot, and Walt says, I'm going to LA, Hollywood, and so he went to Hollywood with his brother and Roy Disney, and they started the Disney Brothers thing, and they were still doing Alice in Cartoonland comics, and then they started Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoon, but they didn't own them. Somebody else owned that. They were just making the films, but he said, this is the place to be. You just got to come out here. Head west, young man. And so my grandfather, he borrowed he drove the car of the little girl that was Alice. He drove that car out with her mother, I think, and he joined their company. So there's only like 7 people at the time in Hollywood. But if you've read the history books of cartoons and things, the owner of the cartoons was sort of he was kind of a scoundrel, I guess. He says, well, we're not going to give you any more money. We want more cartoons, but not as much money. And if you don't do that, I've got all your animators have signed off. They're coming to work here in New York. And Walt was pretty much flabbergasted, and because all of his animators sort of up and left, except Ub. And the way the story goes is that on the train ride back, Walt said, "We got to come up with a new character, and how about a mouse?" And so my grandfather he just altered Oswald the rabbit and turned him into a mouse, and it was all circles, a lot of circles. My sister did a film about our grandfather, and she asked me to be the hand and to draw some the mouse. She was able to Xerox many original drawings of Plane Crazy, the early cartoon of Mickey wanting to be like Lindbergh, and just trying to trace those circles. I could feel the speed of that hand, because he could draw like 700 drawings a day, and he was just and they're all circles and clean circles, and it was such a great feeling to be tracing those circles of my grandfather and feel that I can feel the speed. I can feel that speed, even though I can't draw that speed. And so she just wanted my hand drawing fast. But the rest of it is my grandfather stayed after all the other animators left. He stayed, and in secret he did Steamboat Willie all by himself. And then right at that time, sound was coming in, and they said, well, we could figure that out. And they started playing with sound and made a little soundtrack on the side of the film, and so they could know the beats every 8 seconds, or every 8 frames or so. There would be a beat, and so they could play to that beat. And so they added sound to it, and it was the first one that was released, but it was, I think, the 3rd film they actually made, because the first one was what was it? There was one of a pirate, or I'm trying to remember the name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But that was the first one that they released, and it was a big success. And Ub stayed with them for a while, and then somebody else came along and said, "Hey, you're doing all the work here. Why don't we'll find you to start your own studio?" And times were tight, and he said, "Well, maybe you're right." And I think they were having differences, he and Walt, and so he sold his 1/5 or 20% of the company, and went and started his own studio. And a lot of people keep coming to us and says, "Well, don't you feel like you could have been a billionaire by now?" And I said, I wouldn't be here. And but he didn't look back, and he wasn't upset about that. But they made up after about 7 or 8 years. He came back, and his success was in special effects and innovative theater things. He could sort of build anything, and Walt would say, "Could you build a theater in a circle?" He says, "Well, sure." And he'd go off and he'd design the Circle Vision cameras and the Circle Vision theaters and such and such. My father is now doing a book about him. He's almost finished, about his father's technical achievements at Disney, and it's been a great pleasure of mine to work with my father on this, because he says, "Well, you know Photoshop really well, so could you kind of clean up these pictures and get rid of the background and all that?" And so it's just been a great joy to work with my own father like he worked with his father. And so.
John, I have one of John's famous flip books here that I'll pass around. But is this an homage to your grandfather, the cartoon style of this?
It was just a natural.
You want to just?
It was just a natural outgrowth.
Could you do it for us so we can see on camera?
This started as a dream. I woke up one morning and said, "Well, if an alligator comes out and jumps off a diving board," and that was it. And then it had a bunch of different endings, and it finally ended up in what is called the Mesozoic Munchies. And the nice thing about this is my friend Tanya Atwater, when I first met her, I'm kind of bowing to her, saying, "Oh, you're the goddess of geology, and you've figured out plate tectonics and the San Andreas Fault and all these things." And she says, "Oh, you're the god of animation. My son, when he went to college, this is the only thing he took was this flip book." And so it goes this way. Guy comes out, does a dive. And the fun about doing this is that everything can move.
Did you hand draw each frame? I mean,
Yeah. And the fish comes out. The diving board is now turned into an alligator. It swallows the fish. And the volcano is getting ready to blow in the background. The alligator evolves into a flying dragon. And then it goes kaboom at the end.
Yeah, let's pass it around here.
Thank you.
I did that because I guess cartooning always came naturally, and I just sat down one night and made a flip book called Rising Rabbits and Related Rarities, and it was a bunch of rabbits flying out of a hole, and and it said starring Oscar the Rabbit. And so the last rabbit that comes out is wearing a T-shirt that says "Oscar lives," and I don't know why I wrote that, and everybody else said, who's Oscar? And I was in high school, so I started leaving little Oscar things all over the school and just sort of dropping Oscar. And but then I came to Santa Barbara, and I was very interested in printing, so I took print shop, and I was able to print my own flip book there. And this one I printed at City College, and I was becoming a lifer at City College. After a while, I knew most of the faculty, and they all knew me. But they said, "Well, what are you still doing here? You've been here for like 10 years now." And I said, but I was going for my what do you call it? A Renaissance education, because it was cheap, and I lived across the street from City College, so I could just ride my bike across the street. And so I was taking music classes and dance and printing and all the arts and all the sports and going through all the sciences. And one day I finally had to wake up and say, well, I'm an art major, but I've got 20 units in geology right now, so what am I doing? Are you going to be a geologist, or are you going to be an artist? And so that was one of those aha moments. And I said, well, I'm going to do art with a geology leaning. And fortunately, a lot of that has come to pass. And I keep getting geology projects. But with Tanya Atwater, she loves animation as much as I do. And she does a lot of her own animation. But if you go to her website, you can see a lot of geologic history that has been drawn out. And it's just fascinating, because she's an oceanographer, but has found that the relationship of the Pacific plate against the North American plate, which is the San Andreas Fault, is the boundary between them. When did the San Andreas Fault begin? And so she's created, by looking at the magnetic data of seafloor spreading, and being able to date that, she's found that, well, the last thing that's subducted, the last time before this spreading center actually disappeared, it was about 24 million years ago. And she could date those because that's sort of like a mirror image. As the plate comes out, and she could date things. This is 80 million years, 40 million years, 20 million years, and here's the present in the middle. And so a lot of the work I did for her was making animations of Earth moving. And so it's been a great thing to work with somebody who knows it, is respected for it, and then she gets the word out. And so she keeps saying, well, I need some animals, I need some prehistoric creatures. And so I do the research and start drawing a bunch of animals. And so it's been a great relationship with her. But let's see. But the flip books, the last one I did was called Totally Tubed, and it was a surfing frog. Totally Tubed.
What was that? What did you do?
A flip book.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and I was selling them at the Yes store for about 10 years, and people said, I've got all three of them. Why don't you make another one? And so I realized I can't. There's not enough time, because there's a lot of time goes into making one of these, and so I made these circles. They're called phenakistoscopes. It's a primitive cartoon toy that was invented in 1850s or so, and it's a circle with a hole in the center and slots around the perimeter, and the back side is black. The front side has a cycle of animation, and I started playing with that concept and learned a lot about how to make things move or stay put or move in the opposite direction. And you spin it in front of a mirror and look through the slots, and it acts like a shutters of a film, and you just see this animated disc. And so they were like little mandalas. I could just hang these on the walls, and they're just beautiful in their own right, because it's a cycle. But by doing some experimentation, I found that if I make one drawing for every slot, you see 10 slots, you see 10 things staying put. They can bounce or do whatever they want. But if I make 11 images and 10 slots, they will move. So I could have the thing actually move. And if I make 9 images for those 10 slots, it goes in the opposite direction. So I found that things could be going all over the place. And so I started making those instead of a flip book, and having my spinning wheels out there.
Can we buy those? Do you have them for sale somewhere?
I don't really have any more. I made them all one of a kind, and so I would Xerox them, glue it down to a piece of mat board, hand cut all the slots and punched the middle out, put a little grommet in there, but they were very fun. One was called it was like Mesozoic munchies. It was a dinosaur walking around in circles, a volcano. You see the center of the earth, magma rising out, and then it booms out into a volcano. And as soon as the smoke clears, the smoke starts going one way, the dinosaurs going the opposite direction. So there's a lot of different motion. And I did one for the Natural History Museum, a real large one. They had it at a dinosaur display, and I made a pterodactyl flying, and there's 3 or 4 different Tyrannosaurus rexes running at different speeds, and so one of them running very fast and the other one's running slower, and the center is bursting out. And when I finally went and colored the whole thing and spun it, the volcano is sucking in while everything's working except the volcano's backwards. And so I kept forgetting about the mirror image, and that you're looking at a mirror image. And so when you paste the originals down, they should be going, if it's going 1, 2, 3, they should be going opposite of their forward motion. And so it was an interesting project doing those things. But we're back here. This show was very beautiful. I really enjoyed everybody's work in this. I'm very honored to have been asked to select the pieces. Like I say, it was difficult. There were a lot of really excellent pieces that could not fit, so I tried to at least get, if somebody entered 3, I would say, okay, out of those 3, I'll take these 2. And then wander around and ask, how am I doing? Can I stop now? Because I don't want to deselect anything more. So there was more of a process of deselecting rather than selecting. But I would bounce around the rooms and say, okay, now we're down to 2. I still have 30 more pictures that I have to eliminate, and that was what was hard about this show. But I hope that I was able to select the best ones if you entered multiples, that you're happy with the selection. The award winners, I gave one to a sort of an abstract piece, a print, and it talked to me of my love of geology. So it's a lot of times a juror is just one person's opinion, and I knew somebody who was kept trying to get into the Santa Barbara Art Association. He tried like 10 or 12 times, and he was always rejected. And his wife was a brand new painter, and she got right in. And he had a big history of painting, and we had to keep saying, well, let's just keep trying, you keep trying. And he finally got in and got Best of Show, and it was the piece that he had entered before. And so it kind of goes to show that the juror is just one person's opinion, and anybody here could be a juror of the same show, and I hope you do so. Are there any more questions?
What made for a good piece, in your opinion? How did you evaluate it?
Like I say, it was kind of subjective. It was my opinion on things. Sometimes in a show of this kind where there's limited space, I look at how many can I get in, can I accept, and so very large paintings have a tendency to go, well, you're going to take up a lot of space even though you're really nice. That has a factor. Frames had some factor in it. There was 2 pieces that I really liked. They were pastel, but the frames were kind of scratched up. And at first I said, well, because of the frames, I'm not going to select those. And then I sort of said, well, come on back in, and I brought it back in. And then found a 3rd piece by that person, and the frame was really nice. The piece was very nice, and I said, "Oh, I'm off the hook. I can select one." And but I like abstraction, so I look at pieces that are abstract, but I look at them in terms of the relationship to other paintings in the show, and how do they fit. If something clashes strongly, it's going to have to hang separately. And so trying to find pieces that work well together. Like I say, my awards went to, the first one was rather abstract because it spoke to me of Earth, and it just had a nice organic quality, and that just kind of, I kept being pulled to that. And so One of Whitney Abbott's pieces spoke of illumination, the theme of the show, because there was an interior looking into the light. Again, that's a backlit painting. The light's coming towards you, and so she picks up on a lot of reflections. I think the third place was I think it was the hummingbirds or the quail, and I just was fascinated by the detail of that and the cleanliness of those pieces. The honorable mentions were, again, that was probably harder than choosing a show, was to come out and find out who do you give ribbons to. Because again, that's subjective. I have to look at it and say, well, this one, I like this one because it's presented in a professional way. It has a cleanliness to it. I think one of the light boxes of a star and the electronic light box it showed a high degree of skill in electronics to making that piece do what it does. And so since there were many things that were battery operated or illuminated or had to be plugged in, there was some concern about the voltage and the ability of the building to handle that. They're not going to blow a fuse or something in. But if you'd like, we could go through and look at pieces individually, or if you have any more questions. Just.
When you judge a show, or when other people judge shows, is it typical that the judge knows the names of the artists? Or is there more often blind judging?
Well, in some situations, as a juror, you're discouraged from looking at names, but I tend to ignore that. I want to see who's here, and if I know that person, it doesn't necessarily influence me as to accepting their work, but it still goes back to saying, well, is this worth? Is this a good piece? It also helps to look at the names, because sometimes pieces are laid out in different parts of the room. They're not together as a unit, so I can't see a body of work all at once. I see one piece, and then later on I see another. And there was a sculptor in this show that had two pieces that were very different, but they were in different parts of the room too. And I try to be more inclusive. As a juror, I try to accept everybody's efforts to be here, and yet one of the pieces seemed rather fragile, and I thought, well, I'm thinking in terms of logistics, that this could fall over or be a problem if it gets bumped into or something. And then I found another piece on the other side of the room, and it was the same artist, and that's because I had looked at the names, and I said, oh, okay, this is a good solid piece, and no problem here. There was one piece that was a lot of light bulbs. Is that artist here? A lot of light, interesting, big. Was that yours? And it was fascinating. You did the other piece of all the eyeglasses too.
No.
Oh, okay.
The fairy with the flower, and the cast the spell on the star.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this one had one little electrical piece that glowed or had a little light thing on it, and then it had a
Spell.
okay. And I looked at that, and it reminded me of a time when I was a juror, and I was hanging the Faulkner Gallery for the adult education faculty show, and one of the faculty members brought in a piece that was about 12 sheets of glass, big pieces of glass, and they were all, the tops were curved so that they looked like silhouettes of mountain ranges, but then each of these sheets of glass had to fit into this really large metal structure, like sleeves. Each one fit into a sleeve, and by itself it probably weighed over a ton or something. I think it's huge, and I couldn't just move it around. I had to disassemble it to move it, and I'd laid all the sheets of glass down on the ground. And I was moving the metal piece so it wouldn't be in the way of school children and concerts or whatever. And then I started to move the glass, and it went kink, and I had broken one of the top pieces of glass. I just felt terrible. And I called Chris Power, who was the head of the department at Adult Ed, and she goes, oh, that shouldn't be in there anyway. And that's not your fault. That shouldn't have even been in the show. And the artist came and picked it up, and everybody was okay, but I felt terrible. So when I saw that piece with the all the light bulbs and things, that came to mind. I thought, well, this looks rather fragile. It looks like something's going to happen to this. And it's well built and all, but it just seems like it's going to get bumped. And so a lot of times I take that into account too, is the safety of the public coming through a show. And I'm glad that the mobile piece is in the window. It was in the corner, and but it has a nice display there. Probably you can pick up wind through the doorway, and it's very beautiful, sort of Calder-esque. Are there any other questions? Yes?
Where can we get more information about your Carrizo Plains trip?
Through the Wildling Museum.
Wilding?
Wildling, L-I-N-G, Wildling, like Earthling.
L-I-N-G,
Yeah.
W-I-L-D-L-I-N-G.
Yes.
.edu, .org?
.com, I think. And they're collaborating with Buellton Parks and Recreation, who are supplying the vehicles. And they will probably start from Buellton early in the morning on that Saturday. I think it's the 18th of April. And I think from that, when I worked on the Carrizo Plain, and I got used to the 3-hour drive. From Santa Barbara, you can go through Ojai and Highway 33, and it was exactly 100 miles to Highway 166, and then turn right for about 4 or 5 miles, and then left on Soda Lake Road.
So it's a painting trip?
It's kind of just natural history. I think they asked me to go because of the mural, that they wanted me to point out what's in the picture. And, which is nice, because I haven't been out there for a couple of years, so I feel like I should get out there before this trip so I can refamiliarize myself. But Carrizo was a beautiful place. It was I became good friends with one of the naturalists who worked for the Bureau of Land Management, and he was in kind of hot water with the BLM because he didn't agree with all their policies, and he was sort of a rebel. But I liked him, and we got along great. But one day he says, I'm out painting at sunset, and he goes, hey, look at those crows. And all of a sudden I look, and there's crows from everywhere, all going to the same place. It's kind of like a big convention. And there was only one telephone line across the entire Carrizo Plain, and they're all going to that line. And I could count, there was 40 on one side of the pole and 40 on the other side of the pole. And you start counting the poles and say, that's 80 for every pole. And there's just thousands of crows all just sort of coming there to roost. And one night I went out from the bunkhouse where I was staying, and pitch black out, and I just decided to go for a little walk. And I look up, and the one power line that's coming to the bunkhouse is solid crows. It's like a picture out of the Birds or something. And I thought for a moment, and then I went, and then they all took off. But they have painted rock is out there. It's a huge sandstone, kind of shaped like a tooth or something, and the inside has had one of the best Chumash and Yokuts rock art. But sadly, it was defaced at the early turn of the last century. People used some of the big symbols as target practice, and so now it's protected, and you can only get there at certain times, and they have to restrict access because of that. Yes.
I was going to ask that the title of the show is Illumination. So how big a part does that play in your choices of subjects? Because it can be interpreted so many different ways. Mm-hmm. Do you look for that in each piece? Or
I do.
Is it loose kind of for you?
I did look for that. I didn't feel like it had to be illuminated. I didn't. If I felt that said something not positive, then I would go for it. But if it was vague, there was a couple of abstract pieces that sort of said, well, I don't really see anything strong here. It's just paint, and so that's my opinion, though. Because the artist might say, well, this is the way I paint, and it's illumination, So that's the hard part of jurying, is to say, trying to interpret the artist's intent in certain pieces.
You keep the title in mind
Yeah.
when you're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, there was one, Ted Rhodes has 3 photographs, and they were all wonderful. But the one I chose was the sunrise over Rincon Mountain, and that's because it was illuminating the scene. He had another nice one of a woman carrying a blazing torch into the surf at night, and that was illuminating. But I was down to saying, well, you still have 20 more paintings you have to choose out. And so I said, well, sorry, Ted, but I'll choose that one. There was one time I felt good as a juror. I was asked at the last minute to be one of the 3 jurors for new members to the Santa Barbara Art Association. And I thought, oh gosh, that's quite an honor. You're asking me. And they asked me on a Friday, and the jurying was on Monday. And in that show, 2 of the judges have to agree if that person's going to become a member. And I had a friend of mine, a student, he was in his 80s, had been taking my classes for many years, and he kept trying to enter the Art Association. He kept getting rejected. And so he says, oh, I'm not going to enter that thing. And when I found out I was going to be a juror, I called him up and says, you might think about entering this time. You know, you've got a vote. You got 1 vote. And so he entered, and the other 2 judges said no. And so I was able to convince them. I said, I've been encouraging this person to enter this show, and he tries really hard. He's a good worker. He hangs shows for Goleta Art Association, and what do you say? And so they said, okay. So he got in. So that was a great experience as a juror, to sort of bump my fellow jurors and say, I want this guy to be a part of this thing. You know? Yeah. So it was, so that can happen. But again, it's 3 people's opinions, and one of the pieces I chose was very good, really beautiful woodwork, and the other 2 judges said no. And so I said, well, why? And they go, well, it's too professional looking. And, how can you figure? And my girlfriend at the time was just beginning to paint, and I matted hers and framed all her paintings. They're little postcard watercolors. And she entered 5, which at that time you could enter 5, and she got in right away. And I think that had to do something with the presentation, that they were all 8x10 frames. They all had the same color mat, and they were all watercolors. And so there's that consistency of pieces. I think judges look for that when you have multiple images. That I don't want to see your figurative and your abstract and your landscape. I want to see all landscape or all figurative, or I want to see continuity. So.
Go ahead.
We're just going to bring out not everything, but just a few at a time. If there's any of your paintings that you want me to speak about, then speak up. This one is a good example of backlit. So as you're looking into the light, and so everything is stark. Here's that radiating shadows, radiating light because of the perspective of that. And so that's what you can get from by looking into the light. You can get this dynamic change of angles.
Can't really hear.
Oh, should I put this back on?
Go ahead.
So this had that simplicity. This was illumination to me. I saw that right off. And it's so simply stark, just white and black, that it carried a good feeling of the theme in that painting. Okay. This one I liked because it's abstraction, but then the circle quality. I was advocating that it hang next to the mobile, because it has a feeling of the circular quality that's in the mobile, so that they hang well together, but it does well in this small space too. I like the shadow box qualities of these, that sometimes as a juror, I look at that and see if it's hastily done or painted with a sense of completeness on the sides. I had a large painting once that had a big deep piece like that, and it was supposed to be framed in a shadow frame where you And so I went to repaint the edge because I would see that edge, and it was a kind of sloppy edge, but my paint was all around it, and so I cleaned all that up, and all of a sudden the painting just looked really good. And I had been looking at it for a long time where I'd kind of lost my critical sense of, is this done yet? And I just sort of said, okay, I've been on this thing for months, and I'm tired of it. But then all of a sudden, just by painting the edge, I said, oh, this needs work, and that needs work, and I was able to jazz up this painting, which was the Carrizo plane, actually.
So we can request a painting
Yes.
in the other room? That top painting on the,
I think in this case, there's a, like I was just saying, there's a cleanliness to the edges. There was a beautiful array of color, the contrasting yellow against violet, the sharp edge of this piece of light white. As an abstract piece, I felt like it could rotate, it could be in any other angle. I think that frustrates artists sometimes when you hang your painting upside down.
painted it upside down.
I think that's a good practice, actually. I do that myself, is paint upside down, and people scratch their heads because it's a landscape. And they say, do you take that and put it down here? And but it helps you see things without emotion or without the sense of belonging. You see it more as an object and color and form and shapes and things.
I think it was that, and then when I turned it around, I saw that this would be the better way to see it. But yes, I agree, it can still be moved around.
I think my brother gets away from it by just painting his signature vertically or sideways. You never quite know which way it's supposed to hang. Okay. This has that same quality where there's a variety of shapes, a square canvas, so you could hang it in a variety of ways. But it's overall the warmth of it brings out warmth in a room. So I feel like it hangs well as an abstract.
Chris, can you come out a little more?
It's me. Oh, sorry. Here. Is that better?
Well, it's better facing us. Yeah.
Yeah, like that?
Yeah. Anything else, John?
Well, the dark shapes here, I guess it's like the Rorschach test or ink test or something. You could try to read into it to say, well, that looks to me like like a galloping horse or something. But that's probably not the intent of the artist. But just to paint a shape that has an abstraction where that feeling can occur is wonderful. I think this one was used for advertising.
It was the publicity piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has a wonderful sense of the quality of the paint. It's almost like glass. It's got such a shine to it. This is backlit, and yet it's abstract. So it has a nice quality where you can read into it. It says, well, yes, it's a landscape, but it's an abstracted landscape. But I like the quality of the paint on this, the shimmer quality of it. It's, like I say, it feels like glass, so like it could be a stained glass piece. I used to do paint by number murals for community events and have to mix up all the colors and number them and then number the big line drawing. And I had so much paint left over that I cut out a big shape of a halibut out of masonite and set it on cardboard, and then took my paints and did a Jackson Pollock thing to it, sort of throwing paint all over this halibut, and I called it Jackson Pollock's halibut. But it had some of this quality to it because they were glossy paints. And
well, I have to admit, it's enamel, but it's fancy name. It's nail polish.
Oh.
It was a playful last minute thing.
That's great.
It's all nail polish?
All except the orange, and I could have done the orange, but I decided after I had painted all orange, I'm going, now what am I going to do? And so I had boxes of nail polish.
That's great. There's a quality to some of those enamel paints that they don't intermix. They kind of keep their edges. And I've seen a beautiful piece once at the Faulkner that somebody did with enamel paints of reflections in the harbor. And because when you look at reflections, they don't mix, they all have sharp edges. And you're looking at a series of images that are abstract, but they're clean edged. And so this painting was done in that way, where the paint was like poured out and the edges meet and they don't intermix, they just stay put. So it's a good use of that.
Well, you can mix it. I mean, I was a nail tech, that's why I had boxes. And because you get taught how to mix it.
Oh, that's great.
Anybody else want to suggest something?
The right behind you, that
This was one of those where you had 3 of them, and it was a hard choice because they were all beautiful. And this one had the sense of illumination to me. That the half shadow, half light. It's the glowingness of the yellow. It felt like it's illuminating. So this is one in which case I felt the theme motivated me. I think I heard one of those. Was this?
Yes.
That's yours too. And one of them was said, "Oh, that's a beautiful self-portrait." And I don't know if that's true or not, but it was one of the pieces.
One of the other pieces?
Yeah.
You have a good memory. Wow. Thank you.
These glass pieces are very nice. The fused glass. Again, this feels to me like it could be. It's illuminating by its colors already, but if light was behind it, it would be like a stained glass illumination too. And I just really liked the style, the change of colors of things in here, the use of the materials. I hope that finds a good home.
There's a little one around the corner, a little diptych.
Painting in a show is my. This had a sense to me of seasons. It's borders on the abstraction, but I feel fall color, spring color through a grove of trees, and so it was kind of a piece of time. And I did something like that on the Carrizo Plain since I had so much time there. I went out one day and did a long panel and divided it into quarters, and drew the scene of the mountains, and then painted just the one panel. And then 3 months later, I painted the next one. 3 months, the next one, and so I had all the seasons going on. I wasn't sure what it said.
You aren't supposed to read it.
No.
It's writing, but you're not supposed to read it.
Maybe that's why I wasn't able to read it. Yes.
Larry would like us to keep doing it this way, so pick some from this room and we'll,
Okay.
Jerry and I'll move forward. Those pieces.
That's one of the.
Wait. You want me to pick it up?
That's one of the ones where I couldn't just take one. They were both equally beautiful, and I just kept coming back and just admiring these. But there's such a grace to it. The cleanliness of the color, the feathering, the action, the pose of the bird. And I couldn't choose one over the other. They both had to stay together.
Can I talk about them?
Yeah.
They're a pair of glass doors that I did as commercial work, and they're deeply carved.
Mm-hmm.
But the color in them comes from a studio where she had captured prismatic light, kind of like the Exploratorium in San Francisco. She had that set up. So I took them into her studio, and that's what the color is. It's a pure beam of separated prismatic light.
Oh, great. But it's a door.
There were panels in a cabinet,
Uh-huh.
and the pair sat next to each other. They were family.
How big are they?
Maybe this big. What's that, 18 by 24?
Yeah, it's very, very, very beautiful.
Thank you.
Again, this is, I would put this in the abstract category. The variety of splatter, brush strokes, changes of color throughout. I'm working on this kelp forest mural, and I'm doing the research of all the invertebrates and things on the seafloor, and it's kind of like you can't get any wilder than nature, and it's this has a natural quality about it, even though it's abstract. It's not defining any particular shape or form, but it's got a rapidness to it. I feel like it was done with a sense of ease, wild abandon, the joy. I like this bright passage through here. But it's probably one that, except for the signature, could probably hang in a variety of ways too. It's nice that the edge, again, I like the cleanliness of without a frame, that the edge is clean. The paint doesn't slip over and the black doesn't slip over. Sometimes that's a criteria, it's just presentation. Does this look like it was just done at the last minute, or was there some thought put into it? And this definitely has some thought. Sometimes I've been a juror for some shows where it looks like somebody spilled their oatmeal or something on their thing and hung it up, and it's like, well, you have to kind of say, well, is there intent, or is there thought on this, or was this just sort of a sense of trying to be abstract? But usually those I don't accept, the oatmeal paintings. Because the ants will get to it. This one I wasn't quite sure what to think about this one. I thought it was an avocado. But the reflection of it, I mean, that's what led me into the thought it's an organic shape, but it's a stone. And the beauty of this photography is how the warmth of this, the cleanliness of that image, the softness of the reflection. And again, the overall presentation, it's a very clean matte, clean frame. Everything works really well with that. The coloration of this goes well with the choice of that. My wife Chris we're getting ready for a couple of shows, one at the Easton Gallery in, I think, late February. And the theme is the Cuyama Valley and its related areas. And then the other show is the Oak Group at the Faulkner Gallery in March, and the theme is land trust, Santa Barbara land trust easements. But my wife Chris is going through her paintings, trying to get ready for that, and says everything's great. It's framed. It's all done, and papered, and wired, and everything. She goes, well, I think that frame works, or maybe I should change this. So you're never really finished. But she's trying to decide whether a darker frame would go well or a maple frame, and so how does it relate to the picture? And because sometimes the frame can detract from your image, or it can add to it.
Could you talk about these two? One is the first place, and
Is your, go ahead. This is the one I was motivated to give the first place award to, which is a hard choice because there's so many nice pieces in here. But again, it was the cleanliness of it. It's a print. You can see the embossed or a monoprint, and it's very well presented. It's very clean. Something about it, I guess my Carrizo plain roots sort of come through, and I see this vast plain with the sunrise and the mountain range, and I read the one big thing about the Carrizo Plain is the San Andreas Fault runs right through the valley there, and the movement of the fault or the plates is faster than erosion can erase it, and because it's scarce rainfall. So I get a sense in this of tectonic plates and earth motion. And so again, that was sort of my personal bias to be attracted to this piece because of my personal interest in geology and earth. Is this artist here?
No, she couldn't come to this.
Give us.
Give? It's not,
Go ahead. That's okay.
this is why I'm saying that those who hung this show have a good sense of design in their own right because of the colors that go together of these two pieces, the size of them, and working with the one on the end as well, that they hang well together. This one has that looseness of a thin wash, very lightly painted, so it has a delicacy where the drawing is still visible, and the breakup of shapes is interesting. The strong diagonal, breaking it up in triangles, and a warm and a cool side.
Thank you. You're my first watercolor teacher.
Oh.
Yeah.
How about these pieces here?
Oh, these are illuminating, of course. There were two of these, the glass pieces, and I probably, in hindsight, should have selected them both because they're good companion pieces. I like the sense that of these illumination pieces that they're mesmerizing. They'd probably be good in a dark room, just to watch that. Is this artist here, AJ?
Yes.
Did you do the
Star.
the star as well? Yeah, that's wonderful. You must have a background in electronics, or
I'm a gardener. I worked at Radio Shack for 2 years, read all the books on beginning electronics, and basically understood the integrated circuit. And I loved LEDs, what they could do back in the late 70s, early 80s, and I started to get interested in manipulating them and doing what they really weren't designed for.
great. Well, Radio Shack misses you, I'm sure.
That's why they're going to business.
Yeah. No, they're beautiful. I don't know. I don't have the experience that you do, but I have the appreciation.
Radio Shack sees them often, I would guess.
Well, now you can get everything online, of course.
Let's see.
Any other requests?
What a corner like that.
Go ahead.
It's Thomas Van Steinish kind of. It's beautiful. What I look for on scenes like this is the symmetry of light when it hits, and the line of reflection, and you've caught the night colors very well. The sense that this moon really glows says a lot about how dark the sky is. I did one painting like that once on Santa Barbara Island, but I snuck into my pocket and I had my glow-in-the-dark paint, and I painted the moon with glow-in-the-dark, and then I shined a flashlight on it because it was night, and my friend who was painting with me, he goes, "God, it's so real, it just glows."
Oh, great. I think you want to talk about that one, a chance to see it.
That's beautiful. That looks like Gaviota area. Is this artist here?
That's mine.
Was this painted up towards Gaviota area?
Right by where the bridge is, and the first turn off, and we were there like 5 in the morning, and I started with the sky, and I knew I couldn't finish the whole thing, so much later I was glad I took a photo. And then I finished it much later. And I drive up there now, you can't, everything has grown up there, you can't see all that view.
Oh, great. It's like a time capsule. You've captured it. Now, you've done a wonderful job. This is pastel.
Yes, pastel.
A wonderful job of all the shapes and forms, the light quality hitting the edges, the early morning light. That's what both my wife and I miss about, we lived on the Rancho Dos Pueblos for 8 years, and it's a private ranch, but we were the last house up canyon, and there's a lot of wildlife coming around and bear prints and things, and he says, well, we don't let anybody paint here, but you guys can paint here. And so, it's just like a couple thousand acres of just virgin, beautiful Gaviota coast, and this looks just like it. It's beautiful. Yeah. Okay. It's of my Jackson Pollock Palabit, has that whoosh and drip quality. I think what I like about this one is the variety of colors, the early wash, the secondary washes, the splatter, and what really helps this is the cleanliness of the presentation, the clean mat, the clean frame. A lot can be read into this. It could be also one that could be tilted or turned, and you get different feelings out of it because you've maintained the abstraction. It's hard to get the splatter. Is that with like a toothbrush? It's kind of like with planned accidents. So it either works or it doesn't. So you have to kind of say, well, go for it. Okay.
Can you do the blue watercolor?
Yeah. This has a nice sense of a wet climate because of the water reflections, the unclear whether this is a cliff or whether it's.
It's a cliff.
Is it?
Limestone cliff.
It has a wet feeling, just the vertical quality of this, the saturation of the water, the almost flooded homes there, or they're living close to the edge.
They're actually floating.
Are they?
Salmon Bay in Vietnam. I thought it was. I've got one I've started. I haven't finished.
Yeah. I like the sense that there's the reflections, the choice of colors and reflections are, they're not everything is reflected, but certain brights are, so you're sort of brought into the middle. But just the quality of the coloration of the cliffs can also be felt like it's the downpour of rain as well, just because it's vertical. Very nice.
Which one is Mary's?
Or not the one, but one of the joys of during the show was getting out of my shell, you might say. I haven't taught for about 1.5 years, and I've missed the interaction with people because I work in a little shed now, and in San Ynez in the summer it can be like 110 in that shed, and so I got my fan club. I turn all my fans on, and in the winter it's just I'm bundled up in jackets and everything.
You need to come back.
But I saw Mary's piece of, oh, Mary. This has a nice abstraction that's the lay of the buildings, the warmth of the background. There's just a lot going on in here. And where is this scene? Is this?
It's not an actual scene.
Ah.
Imagination.
Yeah, I think what I appreciated about this is that it's a monoprint.
Yes.
And monotype. It's got I love the clean edges that these make when they're printed. The presentation of that, the overall warmth of the scene, and the cleanliness of its presentation. It's like someplace I can imagine people running around and they were chasing chickens or something. This was one of those difficult ones because you had 3 jellyfish paint photographs. And they were all really beautiful. I wouldn't want to get too close to it. But I think that there was a toss-up. You had another one that had about 5 jellyfish in it, and I chose this one because of its symmetry. I'm not distracted by the other jellyfish. I can focus just on the one, and it's just beautifully illuminated, so it fits the theme too. And so,
Do you judge much with having glass or non-reflective glass?
Well, non-reflective glass is wonderful. Museum glass, or AR glass, works well because you're not distracted by the reflection. It's expensive though. This has a nice matte or feeling because it has a matte that's separate from the print, or 2 mattes. And so there's sort of this little drop shadow box feeling. My wife is more of a studio museum glass person than I am, and I just ordered a sheet of glass because I had an odd-shaped frame, and I said, oh, just any old glass is fine. But then again, it's practice what you preach, and so I said, well, the one thing with museum glass is that I can't use like a standard Windex or something to clean it. I have to use something different, and you can't. Fingerprints are hard to get off it, and so there's a lot of special handling of museum glass. That's beautiful.
Is there anything in the front?
Now this raku piece is beautiful. It has a landscape quality to it. The texture of it. There's a variety of texture that's gone in that helps grab the glaze colors. The natural quality of the clay itself makes a nice border for it, and it's designed to hang, which is nice. So it's nice when that's thought of in the process of making it, that it's going to be the piece that hangs. And this piece, this ceramic piece, I had a hard time choosing between this and the other one that had a kind of a more floral or a wave-like quality to it. And I felt that the function side of this, I was looking at it like a dishwasher and saying, I really wouldn't want to wash that other one because it's too fragile. And so this had more of a sense that it could be a functional bowl. So I saw it as function. I used to do a lot of ceramics myself, and that was my first love for a long time. It was ceramic sculptures. I'd make dinosaurs and all kinds of whimsical creatures. But in the process of moving to Santa Ynez from Rancho dos Pueblos, I'm looking at these things going, you've been around for a while, and you're going to the dumpster. So that was a painful thing to do. It's like
Bad artist.
It got bad. The worst part was when I started going through my sketchbooks, because I have like 40 or so sketchbooks, and I was going, well, there's a few good drawings in here, and there's a few good sketchbooks, but a lot of these I could get rid of. And so I started tearing them up and burning them, and I had to just say, okay, that hurts. That hurts. I can't. Don't do that. Put them in a box. Carry them around for another 10 years. Are there any others that you?
I think there's one here with a ribbon on it.
But I can't, I can't open it up.
Oh yeah, last week. Yeah, I just saw that as real fun.
Turn it there?
Yeah.
I can't do that. Oh, no, it's stuck.
Okay.
He's got it stuck on it.
Did you want to say anything?
It just does a lot. By itself, unplugged, you know, we had to plug in everything to see what is this? Why is it electrical? And then to see that piece just come alive like that was just really gorgeous because it does so many different things. And so I thought the person who created this has an electrical mind, and I really admire that. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.